Welcome to In the Rising podcast. My name is Bettina Brown. I'm your host, and I am a physical therapist, owner of fitafterbreastcancer.com, as well as a Christian life coach. And I'm really excited that you made the decision to rise up today and create the life that you want to live. Every single area of our life, whether it be financial, emotional, our relationships, and our health, is an important part of that journey. As a physical therapist, I worked exclusively for several years with people going through a certain type of cancer. And I kept hearing that same statement of regret. Not living the life that you want to live is what regret feels like, Bettina. And I don't feel that we have to have anything to regret, or at least we can make a change to regret less in life. We can make those changes and live the life that we want to live starting today. And it is my hope and goal that this podcast helps you on that journey. Our relationships are a very important part of our life. And sometimes we carry the burdens, the experiences, whether consciously or unconsciously, of our childhood right into our adulthood. And yet we know we want to have stronger foundations and better relationships. My guest today is Riana Milne, and she is just a wealth of knowledge and has dedicated her purpose in life to helping others move forward. Well, good morning, Riana. Happy Tuesday to you. We're talking on a Tuesday morning, so thank you for being part of In the Rising podcast.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
And so I'm really excited to speak to you because you have topics of interest to my listeners, but topic of interest to me personally, right?
Okay.
You are a certified global life and love trauma recovery coach. And we could stop right there. Love and trauma. How many people do we know that is a stunt, like it stops them from moving forward, either in a personal relationship, as an intimate relationship, or just in a family type, and the trauma that it holds them back. So that's amazing what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, love trauma is a direct result from childhood trauma that's not healed. Mm-hmm. And when I started doing my research on childhood trauma in 2012, I had gone through a love trauma. And I am a psychotherapist as well, licensed mental health counselor. So I went to 7 counseling friends. What does he have that made him act out so impulsively? Because I'm going through the DSM-4, which is our little, yes, diagnostic manual. And nothing that he had or the signs that he had was in there. So that's what led me to my research and my #1 best-selling book, Love Beyond Your Dreams. And it came down to childhood trauma. And some people would have known of maybe attachment styles, but this was digging a lot deeper, the research. And I identified at that time the top 10 childhood traumas that 90% of people could identify that they had 1 to 3 on my list. Mm-hmm. But as of 2021, since COVID, they're saying 100% of us have childhood trauma. So what is happening is the brain likes homeostasis, which means it likes what it knows, even if it's good or bad for you. Mm-hmm. It would consider it normal. So it likes to keep you in that state of normalization. So if you grew up and you're a female and you grew up with a very angry, authoritative father, you might be attracted to that type of male. And, that's what we call chemistry. Yeah. So unfortunately, people only knew from our romance novels and our books fall in love because you're feeling this pitter patter of chemistry. Mm-hmm. And that's what we call unconscious dating. You're just going with, it feels good, instead of really thinking about, is this the right partner, asking the right question, which we call conscious dating. So that's what I do as a coach. I heal the childhood trauma and then the love trauma, because most people come to me after experiencing not only the traumatic abuse of marriage, and then the next boyfriend's similar, mm-hmm. and then the next one. And it's like, wait a minute, why do I keep doing this? Because after each relationship, they read 100 self-help books and dating books and relationship books. And it's like, I know I'm going to get it different this time. And then they don't. And it's like, why am I attracting the same kind of person?
Yeah.
So this is what we call RRS, relationship repetition syndrome. There's actually a term
Mm.
for it,
Oh,
going back to the same type of person, or consciously knowing your partner is not good for you, but you keep going back anyway. Like after the sweet spot, 7 to 10 days, you return back thinking it's going to be better, or he's sorry and he really loves me, but you keep going back. And then the trauma just keeps getting worse and worse as the self-esteem and confidence keeps going down and down.
yeah.
So yeah, it's really
Yeah,
important to get out of
absolutely.
the cycle.
And I have done the same thing myself for sure. And it does take some time to self-evaluate that. And I think it also helps to hear it from someone else outside of you, what
Hmm.
they're seeing, because it's hard to see the wine bottle from the label from inside and read it correctly, where someone
Yeah.
outside can read that for sure.
Well, the important thing is first, I came up with this own saying when I was going through the process of my research and learning what I had to learn. Then I was healing myself and I was healing all of my clients. I'm like, oh my gosh, all my clients hear this. And I have a triple master's in psychology, right? We did not hear
Mm.
once the term childhood trauma.
Oh.
So I developed a childhood trauma checklist for my clients so I could identify what they went through as kids. And then I knew what they're going through as adults and why they're attracting who into their life, right? So it just made so much more sense to them to identify it than I could put the puzzle pieces together. So it really begins with identifying the top 10 traumas.
Yeah, yeah. And you've done a lot of research. Obviously, this is a topic, triple master. You don't do that because you're bored. There's obviously there's obviously some pull in there to help you help other people. Where did that really come from you? Was that just always an interest, or was that something that was just relatable and you wanted to help?
No, no. When I was 16 years old, I knew exactly where it came from. My very best childhood friend died. He was killed by a drunk driver.
Mm.
And it was a huge loss for me. It was the first death I really experienced. And I asked my mom if I could go to a counselor because to help deal with the grief and the loss. And she said, no one in this family will ever go to a counselor. And I said, then I'll become one. So that's where it came from. And, that's why I'm also a drug and alcohol addictions counselor in Michael's name. And then at 23, I lost my second best friend. That was my Penn State roommate for 3 years, and she was murdered by her boyfriend.
Mm.
So, in her name, I went into one of my internships was at a domestic violence shelter. So, I was seeing the repercussions of all this love trauma going on, and that the woman kept wanting to go back, and they couldn't see their way clear to move forward.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, you've been through trauma, and there is no love trauma, like I said in the DSM-4. There's no childhood trauma in there. And I think that's a huge miss. So,
Yeah.
and I also love the coaching profession. So, I am a global coach. As a therapist, you can only work in your state. As a
Mhm.
coach, you can work internationally. So, I became also a CCTP certified clinical trauma professional. And that's where, my specialty comes in healing the trauma of both entities, childhood and love trauma, and
Yeah.
getting people unstuck and moving forward. There's a lot of fear-based negative thinking when you've been emotionally traumatized, either from childhood or from love trauma. But if you'd like, I'll go into, some of the top 10 traumas. So our
I
people know,
will.
do
I
I have
will.
this? Do
Yes.
I not have this?
I
Because
do
that will
want
help them
to.
understand. Okay. All
Yes,
right. So,
yes. And I want to say to that one thing that what I see, because I'm in healthcare, I'm a physical therapist,
yes.
and I
Mhm.
actually worked with a lot of women who had breast cancer and learned how stress can affect the body in
Oh,
a
definitely.
physical way. And so I think it's also important. It's not just your emotions. I had one client who said she went back 26 times. And I thought, well, how did you measure it? And she counted it by years, 26 years of going back to this trauma. And I will never forget. And this is why I became a life coach as well, because I was listening and listening, but I can only do physical therapy in those sessions, right?
Yeah.
Of how many of my clients talked about their trauma and from their own lips verbalized that these traumatic experiences and their stress and the stressors involved, they knew it in their soul and they knew it in their body that this had a direct link to their cancer.
Absolutely. And there is actually a map that I share with 7 areas of where childhood trauma impacts people. So,
Hmm.
briefly, it is physical health, like sleep
Yeah.
disorders, eating disorders, poor immune function, like fibromyalgia,
Hmm.
Epstein-Barr virus, which they call chronic fatigue, cardiovascular, early death. That's just some of the physical things, irritable bowel syndrome.
Yeah.
And then there's emotional, there's relationship, mental health issues, behavioral issues, and brain development. So I was also they're called a SAC counselor, student assistance counselor. So I worked in the schools
Hmm.
as the emotional trauma coach or counselor, really. So it's very different than a guidance counselor that focuses on academics. Focused on the emotional. So I did that at every grade level, kindergarten all the way through college. I was a SAC counselor. So I saw firsthand what it was doing to our kids, and they're all thrown on ADHD medicine. I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. This child's coming from a traumatic home. So I was doing methods that weren't even heard of, kind of woo woo, like meditation,
Hmm.
music therapy. One of my favorite was them listening to Louis Miguel. And I don't speak Spanish, but the music and the melody just calmed them right down. These my elementary kids, and I'd send them back to the classroom after meditation and some
Yeah.
Louis music. They'd say, Miss Riana, put on Mr. Louis today. I said, oh, did you have a bad morning? What happened? So that's how we would calm down the brain and the body, because when the
Mhm.
body's upset, cortisol goes up and memory goes
Goes
down. So
down.
they have learning issue because they're so hyped up,
Mhm.
right? So that's what I was doing a lot of with my kids, is like, and then having them learn to talk about it without fear. So um, really interesting work. So I've been doing it like 23 years. Yeah,
Wow.
and so many different capacities.
And I like that you talked about that it affects you at all different levels. And like you said, that your mom said people in this family don't go to counseling. That was a very prominent belief for a
Back
very
in the
long
day.
time. You
Yes, I'm a
don't
baby
admit.
boomer. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't admit there's a problem. And then when you have a problem, you don't deal with it.
Right.
It gets
Right.
bigger.
And, I worked in a mental health ward in a hospital as well, in the kids unit from age 5 through 19. So I really want to share with parents, if you're seeing signs in your kids, don't think it's just a phase or it will just go away. It's really important that they have someone that they can talk to, someone that they relate to, though, that's kind of hip. And, back in my elementary school, my daughter was singing with a top pop artist, so they liked that. And, they felt they could relate to me. So I work now with those 16 and up by the internet, so I can work with anybody 16 and over. But I mean, some of the signs they should work with is eating disorders,
Mhm.
cutting, definitely, isolation in their room. There's either the internalizers that are more quiet and private, or the externalizers that might be running away, or smoking pot every day, or risky relationships. So
Yeah.
just look for the signs that your children are not happy, and
Yeah.
don't take it personally. Life is hard out there. Our society is really hard for kids to navigate, and there's so much going on in the schools to feel loved or popular or have friends. That's usually the base of a lot of it.
Mhm.
So do get them help if you see signs of it.
Yeah. And it is important because it may take a long time to go through those things. And it's not, and I loved how you said, don't take it personally, because I think a
Hmm.
lot of parents do. Well, I did the best I could. And don't they
Right.
understand? It has nothing to do with you sometimes.
Well, it is proven that childhood trauma goes through 3 generations. So I
Mhm.
know when I have a client in front of me that their parents also went through some hard times, and so did the grandparents. It is
Yes.
also known that it changes the DNA. They
Mhm.
did a huge study with Holocaust survivors, the lineage,
Yeah.
and it goes through at least 3 generations, where the third generation has higher anxiety and more fear-based thinking, and more feelings of lack of security. So, and that is all DNA expression. So it's a really important topic. And I mean, I love teaching it. This is my purpose. Let's go into those 10 traumas. What do you think?
I love it. Let's go.
Okay. All right. So, first of all, I just want to say this is not about shame and blame, not about feeling bad about yourself or blaming your parents. So, it's more about just being really open and honest and say, huh, did I experience that? Because again, childhood trauma is never our fault. We were just a product of our environments.
Mhm.
And I say environments plural, because your home life could have been amazing, but you were bullied at school every day,
Yeah.
right? So it's really the whole childhood experience. Okay, so the first one is any addictive behavior in the family. So we're talking drugs, alcohol, sex. So you knew your parent was a cheater, porn, gambling, hoarding, spending, eating, gaming, TV watching, workaholism, and social media. I add that if someone's on their computer or phones all the time and just ignoring the kids. Okay, so that is that number one. Number two is verbal messaging. So, did you hear the words "I love you"? Did you hear a lot of compliments? And in my cohort, so many of my cohorts did not hear the words "I love you." I did not either. I made sure I did with my kids because that
Yeah.
felt so important to me. But instead, was it always like, this isn't good enough? You're not measuring up. You can do better. Even when you did your best, oh, you can do better. Or did you also witness domestic violence and the yelling, screaming of your parents, and that's how they handled an issue? Okay, so all verbal messaging. Number three is emotional abuse and neglect. And they
Mhm.
even said that 9 to 5 single mom that had to go to work to support their kids, if the kids were latchkey, meaning they opened the doors themselves,
Yeah.
let themselves in for 2 hours till mom could get home. Back then, there really wasn't cell phones. So they're saying that fear of being alone in the house, created high anxiety and some abandonment, even though those moms felt they were doing the best to support their kids, right? The research is really interesting. Okay, the next one is any physical abuse, rape, or molestation inside or outside of the home. The next one is abandonment. So this trauma names two types: fault and no fault abandonment. So no fault abandonment would be if a parent happened to die early, if a
Mhm.
parent had to travel a lot to support the family, so they were gone quite a bit, and if they served their country in war and they had to go away.
Mhm.
I saw so much separation anxiety in my elementary kids when their parents were serving at war. Like,
Yeah.
is my dad going to come home? Like, it's very scary feeling for little kids. Okay, the next one is if you live in another person's home, even if it's like aunt or grandma's house, I couldn't keep you in your house, or if you were adopted or part of the foster care system. Okay.
Mhm.
The next one we call personal trauma. So this is if you didn't feel good enough for some reason. Maybe you were a chubby child and teased for that, or skinny and gawky and felt like the nerd. You just didn't fit in. Or you might have been the only African American at an all Caucasian school. Coming out as an LGBTQ teen, will people love me? Will they accept me? Will my parents reject me? So all this coming into adulthood, and do you fit in? So anytime you just didn't feel good enough, or not confident. Okay.
Mhm.
The next one is sibling trauma. So if you know your sibling was the golden child, so maybe they were the star athlete or the pretty one, or just the favorite. A lot of cultures, the son was always the favorite one. The daughters just grow up and get married kind
Yeah.
of messages, just
Yeah.
shove you off to get married. Okay, next one would be it's two parts. And number 11, I had to bring down into the top 10. When I was doing a lot of this research, this was not that prevalent. Now it's one of the biggest one, which is called community trauma. So this is our
Mhm.
school shootings, our mass shootings, mother
Mhm.
nature events, floods, fire, hurricanes, that COVID that impacts our community at
Yeah.
large,
Yeah.
right? So that is like one of the top traumas today. And back in the day, I had that at number 11. So it had to be at the top 10.
Yeah.
So I also tied that with family, because family trauma would be like our military families in the US. They move every 2 to 4 years, which is putting the child as the new kid in school every
Mhm.
time. It's families that grew up with lack, or the lack messages like, we don't have enough. We may not buy groceries as much. There's just too much. We can't pay our bills. All those lack messages like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, we're poor. That's how I grew up. I mean, my mom didn't even have the heat on in Pennsylvania. And it's like, Mom, it's cold. She goes, you have blankets. And I had a hat, mittens, and socks on to go to sleep so it would be warm enough. I grew up thinking we were poor. So I had to really get rid of those messages for myself to excel in
Mm.
business,
Yeah.
right? Because you have to invest in yourself to get to the next level of where you want to be. So you have to have the mindset that of abundance, not lack,
Lack.
right? Okay. And then the last one is under mental health issue in mom and dad. Now, my baby boomer generation, our parents didn't go to counseling. So you have to kind of guess. But the two most difficult for children to grow up around is bipolar and borderline personality disorder. So borderline is fast trigger anger and real erratic mood. So when they're good, they could be great, but when they're bad, they can be horrid.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the kid doesn't know which one they're going to
There to
get. So
go.
it's a very
Mm-hmm.
high anxiety child that grows up in that environment. And then the other one is bipolar, which is manic depressive. So a lot of people think manic is that high and happy phase. Well, it could be, but it's often tied to an addiction like
Mm-hmm.
spending or eating or gambling. Okay. And depression can show up as anger, checking out emotionally, or just depressed feelings. So
Yeah.
those are the top 10 traumas that, and most people can identify 3 or 4 of them now
Mm-hmm.
versus 1 to 3 that they grew up with.
Yeah. And definitely like, oh yeah, that happened. And even if it was all, like you said, unintentional, the parent had to drive around to
Right.
support the family, but the parent was still not there. And
Exactly.
it still has feelings that you may not even realize that is playing a factor in your life and then affects later in life, like you mentioned with your business.
Right, right. And fault abandonment, I may not have mentioned that one, but never being present in the child's life, being there until the couple breaks up, and you rarely saw your child or is erratic.
Mm-hmm.
And it also could be a parent in the house, but they're not emotionally attached.
Touched.
They go from the office eating dinner, then to the home office, or they just don't engage with the child. They don't go to the kids' events, that kind of thing. Just there, but not emotionally connected.
Yeah.
So, how does this show up in our love relationships? What's the correlations? Let's give a few examples. There's many, many, but this is just a few. So jealousy and control
Mm-hmm.
come from trauma 7, not feeling good enough or pretty enough. Like, yeah, I think this person loves me, but maybe he's out doing something else, right? So that paranoid jealousy, control, blaming behavior, not in being able to apologize. That's when you feel you have to be right.
Mm-hmm.
This perfectionism, everything has to be in order. So perfectionism often comes from dealing with the upsetting, difficult parent. Like if I be the good little girl, daddy won't yell at me. So
Mm-hmm.
people pleasing came, as a way if I do everything right, then he'll love me. So I have couples coming in that say, I do everything for my husband and my kids, but I get no love or gratitude back. So the boundaries are so stretched. And
Yeah.
then they just feel like they've lost themselves in the relationships. Like, I don't even know who I am. I just do for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And me, nobody cares about me, so that feeling came from those childhood patterns. Impulsivity is maybe someone growing up with the lack messages, and it's like, I want that shiny red sports car. So what if I go in debt, or my wife might yell at me? I want it anyway. So those impulses, or the
Yeah.
cheating spouse will fall under the impulse scale. I do all kinds of assessments in 1 hour, and I can figure out what is going on there. Abandonment issues, when you've had those, it can lead to clinginess when they're away, feeling, like this anxiety when your partner's gone. It also leads to that RRS, going back to the toxic partner over and
Mm-hmm.
over again. Codependency behavior and love addiction, which is that repetitively going back. A lot of addictions come from childhood trauma, certainly not all. They can happen, after a car accident, someone gets, addicted to opioids or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. But also, you're addicted to cheap drama when there's a lot of drama or yelling in your house. And you may be dating someone who's emotionally healthy and really a nice person. And then you hear someone say, well, but they're boring,
Yeah.
and it's like, that's because you're addicted to the cheap drama. And it's like, well, what do you mean? I said, was there a lot of yelling and fighting going on in your house? Well, yeah. Well, that was their normal.
Yeah.
So anyone who's emotionally healthy, they're going to feel bored with that partner.
Hmm.
So, it's really identifying the level, one, what are the traumas? Two, what is the severity level? Three, what's happened in their prior relationships and where they are now. And then I put all the puzzle pieces together and then help them heal and move forward.
Yes.
And I do singles, couples, straight, LGBTQ, women, men, 16 to 76.
Wow.
So
So
childhood trauma
someone's
has no prejudice.
it has no I was just gonna say
Yeah,
it doesn't have a boundary. Like it's like, yeah, that's pretty much all of us to
that's
some
right.
extent, fault or no fault. And I think that's important to emphasize. Someone's listening, they're like, yes, 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 I feel it. And I am willing, because there are people that are not willing to make a change, right? It has to be, they're fine with it is. The cheap drama, that's all I know.
Well, they're
That's
not
where I
really
feel safe.
fine, but change is scary for a lot of people.
Yes.
They
Yes,
don't
it
feel
is.
they're going to make it or be able to
Mhm.
do it. So really, it's important just to take the first step and realize that you can live on the other side of what I call the rainbow. You're at this point of, I don't know what I don't know. Like, why do I attract these kind of toxic people into my life? What is going on? And I say, my quote is, you can't change what you don't understand or acknowledge. So the
Mhm.
first is really saying, yeah, I've had these traumas. Now what do I do with that? You
Yeah.
know, and then we start the healing process, which is the learning curve, and that's where all the research is in a program that I help my clients heal. And then they get the dating and relationship information, how to date successfully. I call it the art and psychology of dating successfully, because there's really a lot to learn, and great communication skills and proper do's and don'ts of dating that we really didn't learn. You can read a whole bunch of books on it, but we're going deeper into the psychology and what are you looking for in date one or two. You'll know this is a good person for me or this is not a good person. And then
Mhm.
you release them in love. You just move on. Someone ghosts you. It's like, thank you, God, for showing me this is not my
Yes.
person. Next, so you
Yes.
don't take all that personally that goes on online. Some people are devastated. Oh, I was chatting with this guy for 3 weeks and he ghosts me. It's like, okay, so next, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But you need that mindset, which we call
Mhm.
the mindset for success, to have that confidence and know it's also a spiritual philosophy, that the
Mhm.
law of attraction, when it's the right one, it will be easy. But the world is abundant. I hear a
Yeah.
lot of, oh, all the good ones are taken. There's someone left. It's like wrong. There's a ton of great people left. You're just not meeting them.
Yeah.
So there's skills to doing all this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so someone's listening, they're like, I like Riana. I want to learn more about her. How can they find you?
The best place to start is my website, and it's simply my name, rianamilne.com. And on there, you can get my free ebook, How to Have the Love You Deserve. And in it has this map of the childhood trauma. There you go, the childhood trauma map where it spells everything out, and the childhood trauma checklist. So start with that. And it has under the book section, the top, the first 60 pages of my number one bestseller, Love Beyond Your Dreams and Live Beyond Your Dreams. They're meant
Mhm.
to go together. One is about mindset, one is about emotionally healthy love. And they are meant to go together. And my podcast, Lessons in Life and Love with Coach Riana Milne. I have over 115 shows, and that's free for everyone. And then the 4 love tests. So if you're coming to my website, do the love tests, take the quizzes. And if you want to dive deeper with me, there's an opportunity there at a great promotional rate to
Mhm.
meet me for 90 minutes, and I will do the correlations for you between your childhood experiences and what's going on for you in love right now.
So, coming away from this podcast conversation, I felt like I just had been water hosed with textbook information, but given in such a way that I kind of want to go back for more and learn more. And I found it really fascinating that a lot of our trauma really is generational. And the more research we do, the more we realize that we are still the product of every generation ahead of us. And even though that makes sense genetically, we have not really thought about the emotional components and the relational components affecting us today. And once you know it is, you can make a difference with that. And so I invite you to share this podcast today. If you know someone who would benefit from hearing this conversation, go ahead and share it. You never know what kind of difference you'll make with one quick share. I also invite you to leave a 5-star review. It does so much for this podcast, and it helps elevate it to a place where other people, whether we know them or not, can go ahead and hear this and make a difference in their life. Until next time, let's keep building one another up.